Rebecca Davis tried her best to ignore the snickering coming from the front rows of the classroom. The Galactic Military Academy was supposed to be the most prestigious institution in known space, but right now it felt more like high school all over again. She kept her eyes focused on her datapad, while her golden retriever Max dozed quietly beside her chair. The classroom itself was massive, built to accommodate species from across the galaxy. The ceiling stretched up nearly 30 feet to give room for the towering Vorthak warriors who made up most of the class. These alien soldiers stood 8 feet tall on average, with thick exoskeletons that could stop plasma rounds and 4 arms that could crush steel. Their armor was polished to a mirror shine, and they wore it even during lectures to show their superiority. Professor Krellvax manipulated the holographic display with obvious disdain. Earth rotated slowly in the center of the room, looking small and blue against the backdrop of space. "Class, observe this rather unremarkable planet," he said, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into perfect English. "Humans call it DEATHWORLD, though I find that classification generous at best." The Vorthak students burst into laughter, their mandibles clicking together in what Rebecca had learned was their version of amusement. Prince Morcath, easily the largest student in the class and heir to the Vorthak throne, turned around and stared directly at her. His compound eyes glittered with malicious humor. "Professor, surely you jest," Morcath said, his voice booming even to the translator. "Earth barely registers 1.2 times standard gravity. My home world has 3 times that. And look at this human specimen." He gestured dismissively toward Rebecca. She brought a pet to military academy. What kind of warrior needs emotional support from a furry creature? More laughter rippled through the classroom. Rebecca felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she kept her mouth shut. She had learned early in her time here that fighting back only made things worse. The academy had accepted exactly 12 human students out of thousands of applicants, and every day she wondered why she had been chosen. Max stirred slightly at her feet, opening one eye to glance around the room before settling back down. To everyone else, he looked like nothing more than a sleepy dog. His golden fur was perfectly groomed. His collar bore no military insignia, and his biggest concern seemed to be finding the most comfortable spot on the classroom floor. "The gravity is weak," continued Morcath, warming to his topic. "The predators are laughable. I have seen their greatest beasts in the zoo. Lions, tigers, bears, all smaller than a Vorthak child. And yet, humans claim to come from a death world." He made a sound that the translator couldn't interpret, but Rebecca assumed it was derisive laughter. Professor Krellvax nodded approvingly. Prince Morcath raises valid points. Earth's classification as a death world has always puzzled xenobiologists. The gravity is barely above standard. The atmospheric composition is unremarkable. The temperature variations are mild compared to truly dangerous worlds. Rebecca watched the hologram rotate, showing her home in all its blue and green glory. From space, Earth did look peaceful. The continents were covered in green vegetation, white clouds swirled gently through the atmosphere, and the ocean sparkled like jewels. It didn't look like a place that could produce warriors capable of standing alongside species that had evolved under crushing gravity and constant predation. "Perhaps," Professor Krellvax said with obvious amusement, "our human student can enlighten us. Miss Davis, why do your people consider themselves warriors worthy of the Galactic Military Academy?" The entire classroom fell silent. 200 alien eyes turned to focus on Rebecca, and she could feel the weight of their attention. Some looked curious, others skeptical, but most just seemed entertained by the idea that this small human girl might have anything useful to say. Rebecca stood up slowly, her legs feeling shaky under all that scrutiny. Max opened both eyes now, though he still appeared to be resting. She took a deep breath and looked directly at the professor. "We don't consider ourselves anything special, sir," she said quietly. "We just do what we have to do to survive." The simple response seemed to amuse the class even more. The desert planet Zirian Prime was exactly the kind of place that made Rebecca question her life choices. 2 blazing suns hung overhead like angry eyes, turning the crystalline sand into a furnace that seemed to cook everything from the inside out. Her squad had been marching for what felt like forever, and every step sent waves of heat radiating up through her boots. The landscape was beautiful in a deadly way. Massive crystal formations jutted out of the ground like frozen lightning, creating a maze of sharp edges and blinding reflections. The sand itself was made up of tiny crystal fragments that crunched under their feet and got into everything, including places Rebecca didn't want to think about. Prince Morcath strode ahead of the group, his massive frame cutting an imposing figure against a harsh landscape. Even in this brutal heat, he seemed completely unbothered. His exoskeleton was designed for much worse conditions than this, and he moved with the confidence of someone who had never met an environment he couldn't dominate. "Human," he barked without turning around. "You're falling behind. Take the extra water containers. Maybe carrying some real weight will toughen up that soft human body of yours." Rebecca gritted her teeth, but didn't argue. She was already carrying her full load of equipment, but complaining would only prove his point about human weakness. She strapped the additional water packs to her gear, feeling the extra weight settle across her shoulders and back. The straps dug into her skin, but she forced herself to maintain the same pace. Max trotted beside her, seemingly unbothered by the heat or the difficult terrain. His tongue hung out, and he panted regularly, but he moved with an easy grace that made the journey look effortless. To anyone watching, he looked like exactly what he was supposed to be, a regular Earth dog who was probably wondering why his human had brought him to this miserable place. The other members of their squad barely acknowledged Rebecca's existence. There was Groktar, a massive warrior from the heavy world of Gorlak. He stood nearly 9 feet tall and was built like a living tank, with stone-like skin that could deflect small arms fire. His people had evolved under crushing gravity and constant warfare, and he viewed the training exercise as little more than a pleasant walk. Then there was Silera, a crystalline being from the silicon-based Silith species. She was beautiful in an alien way, with a body that looked like living glass and the ability to communicate through light patterns as well as sound. Her people were known for their tactical brilliance and their ability to survive in environments that would kill most other species instantly. Both of them treated Rebecca like she was baggage they had been forced to carry. They spoke to each other in their native languages, pointedly excluding her from any planning or decision-making. When they did acknowledge her presence, it was usually to give her some menial task or to make comments about human frailty. The electromagnetic storm came out of nowhere, like most dangerous things in space. One moment they were trudging through the crystal desert, and the next moment the air itself seemed to come alive with crackling energy. Rebecca's skin tingled, and she could taste metal in her mouth as the storm's interference washed over them. Their weapons died first. The advanced plasma rifles and energy projectors that each squad member carried simply went dark, their power cells scrambled by the electromagnetic pulse. Communication devices failed next, leaving them isolated and unable to call for backup or evacuation. "Equipment failure," Groktar rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "Storm interference has knocked out everything electronic." Prince Morcath checked his own weapons, clicking his mandibles in frustration as each device failed to respond. "This is unacceptable. How are we supposed to complete the mission without proper equipment?" That was when they heard the howling. It started as a low, haunting sound that seemed to come from the crystal formations around them. The sound was unlike anything Rebecca had ever heard, part shriek and part roar, with an underlying harmonic that made her teeth ache. It was the sound of something that had evolved to terrify prey into making mistakes. "Razor-spine hunters," Silera said, her crystalline body flickering with patterns of alarm. 6 of them, maybe more. They're using the crystal formations to amplify their calls and confuse us about their location. Rebecca had read about razor-spine hunters in the mission briefings. They were Xerion Prime's apex predators, built like a nightmare fusion of earth wolves and praying mantises. Each one stood about 4 feet tall, but was packed with muscle and equipped with metallic spines that could punch through military armor. Their claws were serrated like knives, and they hunted in coordinated packs with intelligence that bordered on tactical genius. The creatures emerged from behind the crystal formations like shadows come to life. 6 sleek killing machines, their metallic spines glinting in the harsh sunlight, their eyes locked on the squad with predatory focus. They moved with fluid grace, spreading out to surround their prey in a classic hunting formation. "Weapons are still down," Prince Morcath said, and for the first time since Rebecca had known him, There was something like fear in his voice. We're completely defenseless. That was when Max stopped being a pet and became something else entirely. The transformation happened so fast that Rebecca almost missed it. 1 second Max was panting quietly beside her, looking like any ordinary pet dog who might want a drink of water and a nap in the shade. The next second, he becomes something that would give nightmares to apex predators across the galaxy. The first razor spine hunter made the mistake that countless Earth creatures had made over millions of years. It saw a smaller predator and assumed it was the weaker one. The alien creature launched itself through the air with deadly precision, its serrated claws extended and metallic spines bristling with lethal intent. It was aiming directly for Rebecca, probably figuring that taking out the weakest member of the group would demoralize the others. Max intercepted the attack with movements so fluid they seemed almost choreographed. There was no hesitation, no moment of decision or preparation. He simply went from resting to combat mode, as if someone had flipped a switch in his brain. His powerful hindquarters launched him upward at an angle that brought him directly into the razor spine's path, and his jaws opened to reveal teeth that suddenly looked much more dangerous than they had moments before. The sound of the impact was sickening. Max's bite force, something that had never seemed relevant during their quiet moments in the academy dormitory, delivered over 700 pounds of pressure per square inch directly to the alien predator's neck. The crunch of vertebrae breaking was audible even over the howling wind, and the razor spine dropped to the crystal sand without making another sound. The remaining 5 hunters stopped dead in their tracks. These were creatures that had evolved on a world where hesitation meant death, but they had never encountered anything like what they were seeing now. The small furry creature that had just killed their pack mate wasn't behaving like prey, and it wasn't behaving like any predator they understood either. Max didn't give them time to figure it out. What followed was a masterclass in predator tactics that had been refined over millions of years of evolution. While the alien hunters were built for power and intimidation, Max was built for something much more dangerous: intelligence and teamwork. He began moving in patterns that forced the razor spines to react instead of act, herding them like sheep into positions where they couldn't support each other. His movements were impossible for the aliens to follow. The dense muscle structure that came from evolving under Earth's gravity made him faster and stronger than anything his size had any right to be. When he changed direction, he did it with explosive power that left the razor spine struggling to keep up. When he needed to stop or accelerate, his Earth-evolved physiology responded instantly. 2 of the hunters tried to coordinate an attack from opposite sides, thinking they could overwhelm him with numbers. Max glanced at Rebecca and gave what looked like a slight nod toward the left. She immediately understood and shifted her position, not to safety but to give Max the angle he needed. The coordination was so smooth that it looked rehearsed, but it was actually something much more impressive. The result of thousands of years of partnership between humans and their canine allies. Max took down the flanking hunter with surgical precision, using the creature's own momentum against it. As it tried to adjust its attack angle, Max was already moving to his next target. His stamina seemed endless, and his tactical awareness was stunning to watch. He never attacked the same way twice, never gave the remaining hunters a chance to adapt to his methods. Prince Morcath and the others could only stand and watch as the small Earth animal systematically dismantled a pack of apex predators that could have torn their entire squad apart. The razor spines were faster than most creatures, stronger than almost anything their size, and equipped with natural weapons that could pierce military armor. None of it mattered. One by one, the hunters fell. Max moved through them like he was solving a puzzle rather than fighting for his life. There was no rage, no desperation, just calm professional efficiency that was somehow more terrifying than any display of raw violence would have been. When the last razor spine hit the ground, the desert fell silent except for the wind whistling through the crystal formations. Max walked calmly back to Rebecca's side, his tongue hanging out again as if nothing unusual had happened. His tail started wagging as soon as he saw her face, and he sat down in the exact same position he had been in before the attack. Prince Morcath's voice came out as barely a whisper, and his translator seemed to struggle with a mix of awe and terror in his words. "What is that thing?" Rebecca knelt down and scratched Max behind his ears, the same way she had done thousands of times before. His fur was soft and warm, and he leaned into her touch with obvious pleasure. To anyone watching, He looked exactly like what he was supposed to be, a friendly pet who loved attention from his human. "He's a good boy," Rebecca said simply, smiling as Max's tail wagged even harder. "Aren't you, Max?" The golden retriever's response was to try to lick her face, apparently more interested in affection than in the fact that he had just redefined everyone's understanding of Earth's combat capabilities. Professor Krelvax's office felt different than it had during Rebecca's previous visits. The walls were lined with specimens from dangerous worlds across the galaxy, each one preserved in crystalline cases that hummed with containment fields. Normally, these displays were meant to intimidate students and remind them of the professor's expertise. Today, they seemed almost quaint compared to the golden retriever sleeping peacefully on the office floor. The professor's four compound eyes kept darting between his computer screen and Max, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. The footage from Xerion Prime played on repeat, showing the systematic destruction of 6 apex predators by what every database in the galaxy classified as a harmless domestic animal. Rebecca sat in the chair across from his desk, trying not to fidget under his intense stare. She had been called to this meeting immediately after their return from the training exercise, and she had a pretty good idea what the professor wanted to discuss. Word of what had happened was already spreading through the academy, though most of the other students seemed to think the reports were exaggerated. "Explain this to me," Professor Krelvax said finally, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into clipped, precise English. His tone was different than it had been in class. There was no mockery now, no condescension, just confusion and something that might have been fear. Rebecca looked down at Max, who was enjoying what appeared to be the most comfortable nap of his life. His golden fur rose and fell with each breath, and occasionally his legs would twitch as if he was chasing something in his dreams. To anyone watching, he looked like the most harmless creature in the universe. "You called Earth a tiny death world," Rebecca said, meeting the professor's gaze, like it was some kind of joke. "But you completely miss what makes Earth actually dangerous." She leaned forward in her chair, and Max opened one eye to check on her before settling back down. "We didn't just survive our death world, Professor. We made it fall in love with us." The professor's mandibles clicked together, and what Rebecca had learned was a sign of confusion. Impossible. Predator species do not form emotional attachments across biological boundaries. It goes against every principle of evolutionary behavior. Does it? Rebecca reached down and scratched Max behind the ears, earning a contented sigh from the sleeping dog. "This isn't just a pet, Professor. He's a result of 30,000 years of partnership between humans and wolves. We took the most successful pack hunters on our planet and convinced them to share their lives with us." She gestured toward Max's peaceful form. "Do you know what wolves are? They're strategic thinkers who can coordinate complex hunts across miles of territory. They have bite forces that can crush bone, stamina that lets them chase prey for days, and pack loyalty that makes them willing to die for their family. We didn't domesticate that out of them. We redirected it." Professor Krelvax pulled up Earth's biological database, scrolling through entry after entry of creatures that humans had somehow convinced to live alongside them. "Your files indicate that humans maintain partnerships with multiple species. Cats, horses, various birds, even reptiles and fish. Every single one of them represents thousands of years of evolutionary pressure and selective breeding," Rebecca explained. "Cats are perfect solo hunters with reflexes faster than most military targeting systems. Horses are prey animals so perfectly evolved that we convince them to carry us into battle against their own survival instincts. And dogs." She smiled as Max's tail gave a sleepy wag. "Dogs are living weapon systems with loyalty programming that makes your best artificial intelligence look crude." The professor's 4 eyes focused on Max with new understanding. The creature's combat performance was not anomalous. It was designed. Not designed. Evolved. But evolved in partnership with us. Rebecca's voice grew warmer as she talked about something she clearly loved. Every human child grows up with stories about the bond between people and their animals. We don't see them as possessions or tools. They're family members who happen to have different strengths than we do. Professor Krelvax's translator struggled with the emotional concepts, rendering his next words in stilted phrases. "This partnership, it is voluntary on both sides." That's what makes it so powerful, Rebecca said. Max doesn't protect me because I train him to or because I force him to. He does it because he chooses to love me, and I choose to love him back. That kind of emotional bond creates loyalty that can't be programmed or purchased. The professor studied the footage again, watching Max's tactical awareness and split-second decision-making. The creature demonstrated strategic thinking that rivals trained military specialists. It coordinated with you using signals that our experts cannot decipher. How is this possible with a non-sapient species? Who says dogs are non-sapient? Rebecca asked quietly. Just because they don't build spaceships doesn't mean they're not intelligent. Max understands complex commands, reads human emotions, makes independent decisions, and forms lasting relationships. He just expresses his intelligence differently than we do. She looked down at Max again, who had apparently decided that the conversation was boring and had gone back to sleep. Every pet that humans keep represents a different kind of intelligence that we've learned to work with instead of against. We're not conquerors, Professor. We're partners. Professor Krelvax leaned back in his chair, his exoskeleton creaking softly. This explains much about human military effectiveness. You do not fight alone. You fight with allies who have been bred and trained specifically to complement your weaknesses. We fight with family, Rebecca corrected. That's the difference. When Max protected our squad on Zirian Prime, he wasn't following orders. He was protecting his pack, and we're part of his pack just like he's part of ours. The office fell silent, except for the soft hum of the containment fields and Max's gentle breathing. Professor Krelvax stared at the sleeping dog with what might have been respect. This changes everything, he said finally. Earth's classification, human military capabilities, the entire framework of how we understand interspecies relationships. Your people did not conquer a death world. You befriended it. Rebecca smiled and gave Max another gentle scratch. And that's why we're really dangerous, Professor. Not because we're the scariest thing on our planet, but because the scariest things on our planet choose to love us back. The great ceremonial hall of the Galactic Military Academy had never seen anything quite like this before. Thousands of beings from across known space filled the massive amphitheater, their various forms of communication, creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, harmonics, and translated speech that echoed off the crystalline walls. But today, all eyes were focused on the small human woman standing at the podium. Rebecca Davis wore her new officer's uniform with quiet pride, the gold insignia on her collar marking her as the Academy's top graduate. Beside her, Max sat in perfect military posture, his own small uniform decorated with service ribbons that gleamed under ceremony lights. The same alien cadets who had laughed at him just months ago now watched him with something approaching reverence. The transformation in attitudes hadn't happened overnight. After the Zirian Prime incident, word had spread through the Academy like wildfire. The footage of Max's combat performance had been studied, analyzed, and replayed countless times by military strategists from dozens of species. What had started as mockery had evolved into fascination, then respect, and finally something close to awe. Admiral Thexkar, the Academy's commandant, stepped forward to present Rebecca with her commission. His massive frame towered over her, but his voice carried genuine warmth when he spoke. Lieutenant Davis, in my 40 years at this academy, I have never seen a graduation quite like this one. You have not only excelled in every aspect of your training, but you have taught us something fundamental about the nature of strength and partnership. The applause that followed was thunderous, coming from beings whose species had spent centuries perfecting the art of warfare. Rebecca felt a lump in her throat as she accepted the ceremonial sword that marked her as a commissioned officer in the Galactic Defense Force. Max's tail wagged slightly, though he maintained his disciplined posture. After the formal ceremony ended, the real conversations began. Rebecca found herself surrounded by alien officers and cadets who wanted to understand what they had witnessed. The questions came in dozens of languages, translated into concepts that often didn't have perfect equivalents across species barriers. Prince Morcath approached her with an expression that would have been impossible to imagine during their first encounter in the classroom. The massive Vorthak warrior, who had once dismissed humans as weak and pathetic, now carried himself with obvious humility. His translator worked to convert his complex emotional state into words that Rebecca could understand. "Lieutenant Davis," he said, his voice carrying none of its former arrogance, "I owe you an apology that goes far deeper than simple words can express. I was wrong about your people, wrong about your capabilities, and wrong about the nature of strength itself." Rebecca nodded graciously, though she couldn't help remembering how he had forced her to carry extra equipment through the desert while mocking her supposed weakness. Max looked up at the prince with calm, intelligent eyes, showing no sign of holding a grudge. "I have a request to make," Prince Morcath continued. "My people, the Vorthak Empire, would like to establish formal diplomatic relations with Earth. We want to learn about your bonding techniques, your partnership methods. We have reconsidered our entire understanding of Earth's strategic value." Similar requests have been pouring in from species across the galaxy. The academic community was scrambling to understand what they had missed about human civilization. Professor Krelvax had become the Academy's leading expert on what he now called Terran combat partnerships, completely rewriting the xenobiology curriculum to account for humanity's unique approach to interspecies cooperation. The professor himself approached Rebecca as the crowd began to thin. His 4 compound eyes seemed to glow with intellectual excitement as he spoke. "Lieutenant, I wanted to personally thank you for opening our eyes to something we had never considered possible. Earth has been reclassified in our databases from minor DEATHWORLD to Apex Partnership Civilization. The implications for our understanding of evolutionary cooperation are staggering." Rebecca smiled, remembering their first hostile encounter in his classroom. "I'm just glad Max could help everyone understand what we're really about, Professor." As the ceremony wound down, Rebecca found herself thinking about the journey that had brought her to this point. She had come to the Academy as one of only 12 humans accepted into the program, facing ridicule and dismissal from beings who saw her species as weak and primitive. Now she was leaving as a commissioned officer with more job offers than she could count and a reputation that would follow her throughout her military career. The real change, though, wasn't how others saw her. It was in how the galaxy now understood humanity's place in the cosmic community. They weren't the toughest species, or the smartest, or the most technologically advanced, but they had something that no other known civilization possessed: the ability to turn potential enemies into beloved family members. As Rebecca and Max boarded the transport ship that would take them to their first assignment, she reflected on what made humans truly dangerous in a galaxy full of warrior species. It wasn't their ability to survive harsh environments or build powerful weapons. It was their capacity to inspire loyalty and love in creatures that had every evolutionary reason to see them as competitors or prey. Max settled into a seat beside her, looking out the viewport as the Academy grew smaller below them. The vast cosmos stretched ahead, full of new worlds, new challenges, and new opportunities to prove that partnership was stronger than domination. The transport's engines hummed to life, and Rebecca scratched Max behind the ears as they prepared for their next adventure. He looked up at her with the same trusting, intelligent eyes that had won over an entire academy full of skeptics, and his tail wagged with simple happiness. Some things, Rebecca realized, were universal constants that transcended species barriers and galactic politics. Max was still a very good boy, and that was all that really mattered